Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Selma Avdic, and on behalf of the American Marketing Association, I want to welcome you all to our webcast. This is sponsored by NetBase, entitled The Art and Science of Social Insights, Tapping Audiences to Drive New Business. So before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few important housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be made available to you soon. We also encourage you all to continue this conversation on Twitter, and you can do so by referencing #NetBaseWebinar. And if you have any technical or content-related questions, feel free to type them in our chat area located on the left-hand side, and we'd be happy to assist you. And so with that, I'm very happy to introduce our two speakers for today. We have Sergio Claudio with us, and he is the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer at RockOrange. I just wanted to tell you something about Sergio before we turn it over to our speakers. So in his current role, he combines creativity, strategy, content, and technology to craft engaging experiences for brands across all media. He also previously served as an interactive creative director with Zimmerman Advertising, the Omnicom Group, where he worked with over 20 brands. And some of those brands are White Castle, Party City, Carfax, Toys R Us, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Papa John's. And we also have Mike Baglietto with us, and he is the Senior Manager at NetBase Solutions. And Mike has over 15 years of experience developing marketing strategies, campaigns, and content for addressing the needs of targeted audiences. And his experience also spans from product management and product marketing to demand generation and social media. So with that, I'm very happy to turn things over to Mike to get us started.
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for taking time out of their day to join us. I think this is going to be a really great session today. Sergio is one of our most successful agency partners, and he has some really awesome insights as really how to drive new business using social insights. Before we get started on today's presentation, I want to give a little background on NetBase to make sure if you haven't heard of us before, everybody sort of knows what we do and who we are. NetBase is the world's fastest and most accurate social analytics platform used by socially powered brands everywhere. Some of our marquee brands are shown below, but that's not an exhaustive list. We have lots of case studies and testimonials and videos on our website. I encourage you to go take a look at some of those case studies, and after the call today, I think you'll find there's a lot of interesting content, a lot of interesting applications on how people are using NetBase to solve their business challenges today. We are recognized as a leader by both analysts and customers, by Forrester and other folks like TrustRadius and G2 Crowd. As a social listening leader, we have over 300 million sources of social insights that we gather from Twitter, Facebook, and all the other social media platforms, as well as review sites and other online content. And we take that information and then we dissect it using our natural language processing technology, which actually gives you more context around the conversations around your brand, your industries, and your competitors. We take a look at that information and we give you the volume or the impact of that conversation, including sentiment, key influencers, and top talkers, understanding the size of any given social conversation, understanding how people really feel, what's their passion intensity, and where these conversations are happening, on which channels and which content is resonating. And that's kind of the, I think you'll see in Sergio's part of the presentation today, you'll see how he takes a look at this information and then makes some intelligent decisions on building successful strategies and campaigns for his brand customers. Customers are using NetBase today to solve multiple business problems, from boosting campaign performance and improving their product launches to protecting their brand health, making sure there's there's not a negative conversation that's negatively impacting their reputation. Also lowering customer care, responding to crises in real time, and most importantly, I think for this audience, driving customer acquisition and retention. I think that's a key use for social insights. And I think you'll see some really interesting examples of that as we go through the presentation today. And with that, I'd love to turn it over to Sergio. Sergio, as Selma mentioned, is the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer at RockOrange, one of our most successful agency partners. Sergio, why don't you grab the presentation and take it from here.
Well, thanks for the intro, Mike, and thank you to everyone for joining us here today. As we've discussed, we're going to be discussing the art and science of social insights. So how do we look at audiences to drive new business for our brands or for our agency, within our agency partners? As everyone has stated, I'm Sergio Claudio, the Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer of RockOrange. We're an integrated communications firm based here in Miami. And by integrated communications, we mean that we use our capabilities of PR, advertising, digital and social media, and content creation, as well as strategy and insights to help create 360 programs for a number of brands, including Zappos, Macy's, Red Robin, and many more. And we've been a partner now of NetBase for a number of years, as we're a data-driven agency that leverages a number of tools to help identify insights and trends that are happening with our audiences and our consumers, and using those insights to craft audience-driven strategies that really drive home solid results for our clients. So when we take a look at how we define new business, we want to kind of level set the playing field here and understand that new business can mean a number of things to brands and agencies alike. So from a brand perspective, we want to look at new business in terms of growing revenue from existing and emerging audiences and connecting with the values and motivating factors of your consumers. As far as agencies are concerned, this is more of a B2B type of approach and looking at building the relationships with new and existing clients through strategies and through insights that can help really promote their business. If there's anything that we can take away in terms of a core sentiment and a core idea for this discussion today, it's looking at how we can use empathy and data to make real connections with people. Now, empathy is a term that's thrown around a lot, but this is really put in there so that we remember to communicate with our audiences as people first. Remembering that at the core we are consumers of our own, we are viewers, we're audiences. And we're also decision makers from a business perspective. So, putting ourselves in the shoes of our audiences and understanding what types of data would be telling of our own habits, what types of data would we be receptive to that can help make a connection and really make an impact on our own decisions. Before we get started, we want to take a look at some quick numbers, some quick facts and news that you can use to some key takeaways that you can take from this presentation. Overall, we're 40% more likely to close new business deals when we back our ideas up with visual insights. This kind of dates back to grade school arithmetic, right? You're not so much graded on the solution to the problem, but how you arrive at the answer. That's the same thing with presenting data and insights. It's about showing your work and walking your audience and showing your audience how you arrive at that conclusion and how that is based in some type of measurable insight. But on the topic of statistics, we also want to remember that people don't necessarily connect with statistics, they connect with stories. It's going to, the stickiness factor of a data value versus a story pales in comparison. And so when we often get into the habit of wanting to run down a list of statistics and percentages to help prove that we've done our work, but it's really more impactful to say, rather than 46% of millennials are likely to follow one trend, painting that picture and showing a story that says, nearly half of all millennials are adopting a new way of eating, based on their lifestyle, really helping paint that picture and draw that human connection to what that insight means. Our last point here, is derived from a popular saying from Dale Carnegie, which is, the most pleasing sound that a person can hear is their own name. We have to remember, in the conversations that we're having as brands and as agencies, that people like hearing about themselves. We often make a mistake of, of, getting on social media as a brand and talking about our own promotions or talking about our own brand and expecting audiences to care. And by the same token, as agencies, we often make the mistake of getting into a presentation and spending the first 15 to 20 minutes talking about why we're so great and why we're such a great partner, rather than, allowing the client, allowing the audience to hear about themselves, because that's what we're really here to do, is to create value for them. And we just wanted to say, to tie that back to, you see this playing in your everyday lives. You all have those friends, and we may be, guilty of it ourselves, in looking at horoscopes and, filling out those BuzzFeed quizzes and trying to figure out what Game of Thrones character we are. And it's because, at some level, everybody is interested in finding out some surprising information about themselves. So as we look into the process of looking at digital insights and listening, it's really a process about asking questions and finding answers. As these are social listening tools, what we're listening for is how can we better understand the problem? What is the insight and what is that metric that's going to stand out to us? What is that story that we can start to pull from the data that helps us better understand the challenge that we're trying to solve? Understanding the landscape. We need to take a look at who the competitors are for our space at For Brand, and who else is speaking to that audience, and who's competing for attention. We have to look at what's happening within the category. If we're speaking about food or dining, we have to understand what is the general conversation. What are the foods that people are talking about? What are the restaurants? What are the brands? And if we're looking at, as an agency and speaking to potential prospects, we have to look at, what does that client space look like? Who are the other brands that are competitive in the space? What have they been successful doing, and where is the opportunity for our client? In tapping the audience, it's having a clear understanding of who we're going after. When we're a brand and we're looking at, we have a great product or we have a great message that we want to get out, we really have to understand who's going to be most receptive to that message, who's going to be most receptive, and who's going to be our early adopter, who's going to be more likely to share, that is going to be best for us to look to build that relationship with, because we have to start at a human level. We also, in finding the audience for the brands that we're working with, it's the same thing. It's adopting that mindset as the brand that you're going after as an agency, and making sure that you truly understand who that core audience is that's going to drive the growth for the company. And at the end here, it's finding the opportunity. What is the best way to connect? So now that we understand who it is that we're talking to, how do we best reach them? What is the best media to reach them through? What are the types of content that they're responding to the most? Is the pie big enough? Is there a big enough opportunity for us to make an impact in the space? What is the product market fit? And most importantly, how do we provide value? Again, just to continue to give ourselves that gut check that we often, put out communications that are more self-serving. We need to adopt the mindset of providing value as a brand to its consumers and as an agency to its clients. So in terms of providing value, we're going to look at a case study that kind of walks us through the process of developing a relationship, going through a pitch, communicating results. But rather than focus on only one client, we're going to do that over a series of brands here that help really show the different ways and the different levels that we can engage and use data to create those relationships. So the first step that we're going to look at here is the opener. How do we become a fortune teller? The beauty of a lot of these data tools that we have at our disposal now is that it allows us to find out so much information about a prospect, a client, an audience, without ever, truly engaging with them in the first place. To be able to get a good look at what's happening under the hood from the outside looking in. Now, we've all kind of been mystified by those fortune tellers that are able to, seemingly tell us what our love life has been like or what our future may hold. And we're able to do a little bit of that when it comes to social listening platforms as well. So the first client that we're going to take a look at, the first relationship, was with Nickelodeon. And with Nickelodeon, they were coming off of a hot summer with the release of their blockbuster film, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, totally revitalizing the brand, bringing new blood and new generations and new activity. And they were coming off of a high. Had such a great case study to show in terms of all the ticket sales and all the moviegoers. all the new product that were sold, all of the interactive engagements that were happening online, the games that were being played, social media. It was a blue chip case study. Now, putting our empathy hat on as a business, we came to understand that what's happening in our industry is that there is a broader audience that we have the opportunity to speak to now. And while plenty of people talk about total market and multicultural, it still hasn't reached that saturation. So what we were able to do is, taking that case study, we were able to score that against social data to really show that, hey, we are able to prove and we are able to see the same amounts of success that they were seeing on their campaign. 3.2 million mentions, 8.4 billion impressions over a period of 3 months. Looking at who their most active sources were, looking at that huge peak in conversation around the movie release. This was certainly a strong case and a strong connection between the brand and the consumers. What we were able to also see is that, feeding into our hunch about multicultural, we were able to also see that there was not as much activity shown against engaging with the Spanish-speaking and U.S. Hispanic audience. Now, also from conversations with their team, we understood that the push was not as strong on that end. And so what we were able to do is we were able to show that, hey, taking a look at your brand from the outside looking in, there is a wealth of opportunity from this organic conversation that's happening with little effort. So this would be an opportunity to make some tweaks, make some changes, and be able to really tap that audience for new business for that brand. Into another partnership was with Revolt Media. So for those of you that are not familiar with Revolt Media, it's an alternative media platform and a media outlet that was created by Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy. Revolt has been really successful in using alternative forms of communicating these stories and really playing on digital media, using social media, using video, using all types of channels to really get people engaged and get those stories out there.
It looks like we may have lost Sergio's audio. Sergio, are you still on the line?
He disconnected. I'm dialing back out.
Oh, okay. Great. I do want to back up one slide while we're waiting for Sergio to reconnect. Let me just back up one slide, and I'll just pick up on this theme here. The sources that you see here on this Nickelodeon slide, the data that they've collected here is just through the social listening platform that NetBase provides to RockOrange and all of our customers. And the way that works is like most of the social platforms, you go in and you define your topics using things like hashtags, brand handles, different channels that you want to look at, and then you can sub-segment that by your audiences. So this is how he's able to dissect these conversations into blogs and social media and news outlets. And then you can break down those channels not only by demographic but content as well. So this is data that you get right from the NetBase platform. And Sergio, have you joined us again? Are you back on?
Yeah, apologies for the disconnect there.
No worries. Let me get you back up to where you were here.
So, as I was saying, this was a Revolt Music Conference, and it was a live event that was happening over a period of 2 days. So, again, putting on that empathy hat and trying to understand them as a business, as a company that has had hosted conventions and hosted conferences for large brands, we understand, the considerations that go into this type of event. So one of the first things that we did was we took a look at the conversation that was happening around all of the key terms and around all of the programming over that 2-day period. Now, Revolt prides themselves on being able to have that engaged audience online, and there was also plenty of conversation starters using hashtags and using social tools within the conference itself to drive that conversation. So what we were able to do for them is we were able to show how that conversation was trending, the activity, the mentions, the impressions over, as the event progressed throughout the weekend. And then we also took a step further and said, as planners of conferences, what they're really, taking a lot of time and consideration into is the programming. What types of programming are going to perform well? what types of speakers, what types of influencers that they get to partner with are going to drive the most conversation. So we were able to score those panels and those discussions by looking at the hashtags used with the panels, looking at the handles, and looking at the personalities that were being mentioned to give them kind of a scorecard to show. And you know, I'm sure they were pretty happy as Diddy, as the chairman of the company, to see that Ask Diddy was their most popular session. But this was something that they found very valuable in terms of programming for future conferences. The next step on top of that, again, is understanding that, you know, a conference of this scale has to be supported by brand partnerships. And in looking at, you know, the process of developing these brand partnerships to support an event like this, you do have to show that result and show the impact of being involved in this type of engagement. So what we were able to do is we looked at the brands that were being mentioned and the brands that had partnered with the Revolt conference, the ones that had signage or that were sponsoring certain panels, and we were able to pull them in to see what were their mentions. And this was something that, a tool that they were armed with to be able to go back and say, hey, you know, Beats by Dre, in 2 days, you had 340 people that were a captive audience that were talking about you and got to experience your brand at this event. So again, you know, just taking that extra step of understanding what are going to be the business challenges of a business partner that's embarking on this type of effort, and supplying them with the tools and information, providing that value to help get them to that next step. So the next phase that we're going to look at here really applies much more closely to agencies, which is the pitch, right? So we've developed a relationship, we've made the introduction, we've been able to show value, and now we're invited to have a further discussion. So in this pitch process, you know, we have a tendency, especially when we're talking about data, that we want to show that, you know, we really understand data and we really grasp it. And a lot of times we'll go into producing these 25-page reports that show demographic information, purchase habits, you know, the whole 10 yards, when sometimes all we really need to do is just show them what they're missing. Show them that compelling piece of information that shows that, you know, while we may have multiple teams that are working on all fronts, there's a big opportunity that we are positioned to take hold of. So the client that we're going to look at here is the Cotton Board. So known for their long-running campaign, the Feel of Cotton. Cotton had set out to do an experiential event with a live 24-hour runway show down on Miami Beach. The show had been running for about a year, and, you know, everything on paper looked like this was going to be a massive success. You know, targeting a young millennial audience, partnerships with MTV, nearly 1,500 looks, running 24 hours, a very unique event. But they were not seeing the coverage and the engagement that they were hoping for, and so they reached out to our team to ask, you know, what's the opportunity? What are we missing? What can we do to really help liven this up for year two? So taking a look at multiple pieces of data within NetBase, the single most important piece that jumped out that really gave us something to anchor our strategy to was to be able to look at the conversations and see that, you know, over the promotion period, there were 17,000 mentions. But, you know, as any of us know that, you know, we're monitoring brand conversations, 17,000 conversations, you know, it's something that we would strive for. But to see that there's only, you know, just under 60 million impressions shows that there's something, you know, that needs to be tweaked there. The other big area of opportunity that we saw was from looking at the timeline and the summary and seeing that, you know, over an event that was spanning 24 hours and had multiple months of promotion, most of the conversation was driven in a single point in time during the event. You know, that there showed us that while there's a lot of mentions, you know, the reach doesn't seem to be going as far as it can be, and the frequency of conversation doesn't seem to be as spread out as it could be. So our opportunity there was to say, hey, you guys have an opportunity. While you've had a lot of activity, you have an opportunity to increase the power of the influencers that you're working with. So taking a look at trends and taking a look at who is really driving conversation in the fashion space, we partnered with Olivia Palermo, Juliana Rancic, Jason Derulo, Jason Kennedy, and a number of others. Furthermore, Jason Derulo is an interesting case because at that time he had been going through a high-profile and highly published breakup with Jordan Sparks. And looking at our target audience that was really tuned into pop culture, being able to bring him on board as an entertainment act, but also get him engaged in the event as an influencer, really helped drive additional conversation and excitement for the event. Looking at the year-over-year growth in year 2, the client was very surprised to see that we were able to pull off, 5,000 mentions, which is, nearly a quarter or just over a quarter of the amount of mentions that they achieved the year before. Our impressions were tripled to 160.4 million impressions. Now, that showed that the power of the influencers is really creating greater reach and greater awareness for the event among that target audience. But not only were we creating greater reach, we were creating greater frequency of conversation, greater frequency of attention. So if we take a look at that timeline has now expanded from being a blip on the radar to a pulse in conversation. And you can see that those pulse and those highlights came from the influencer involvement, from anticipation and excitement around the event, from other types of activities that were happening to really show that this now had a living and breathing heartbeat. On top of that, our other metric to deliver against was that they were live streaming the event, and our live stream of the event in the first year received a million viewers in that 24-hour period and a little bit further beyond that. In year 2, with this type of program behind it and that type of conversation, we were able to drive 1 million viewers in the first 8 hours. So it just goes to show that, it's not just how much you're speaking, it's about who's talking about you and is that audience connected, is that message and is that voice connecting with your audience. So the last step in the process that we're going to look at here is how do we take those insights and drive conversation that drives conversion. Some of the things we're going to cover here are communicating the ROI of social media. A lot of times, that's a big challenge that we face in terms of getting our brands and getting our teams to adopt digital avenues. And so we're going to look at some ways here that we help some clients, really capture the value of having that engagement online. So our story here today is going to be with Zappos. So Zappos is a top-tier online fashion retailer. They're, overwhelmingly known for their shoe business, but they're also a full clothing business. And so that was part of the challenge, was helping to create greater awareness for not just shoes, but all of the, accessories and clothing items and family items that they offer, but also, building that relationship and connecting further with moms, connecting with that larger audience. This was a brand that was seeing that, while they're having great business and they're getting great sales, they're not seeing the repeat business that they'd like to see. So how is it that they as a brand can tap into that audience to drive greater relationships with those moms and those audiences? In providing value, what we were able to do is we were able to glean insights from the sound bites, the frequent conversations that were coming up. And what we were able to do is really help understand the pain of this audience. And the pain from what we saw in terms of purchasing shoes and items for back to school were that moms were feeling lost. Moms were feeling like they didn't have the guidance that they needed to help make the decisions around what size shoes to buy for their kids. The challenge there is that children are growing at such a rapid rate that they have to buy new shoes at such a frequent basis, and not being that far ahead can cause health risks by having their kids wear shoes that are a little too tight or a little too big that can lead into health problems. The growing pains. There was a lot of conversation that was happening around discomfort in clothing and shoes that were not fitting properly, and how those were impacting the health of their children. And those types of sentiments were leaving moms feeling helpless. So what we were able to do is really use these insights and these sound bites to help the brand understand that, if you want to reach this consumer and you want to connect with them, you have to solve their problem. You have to solve their need. And so the strategy here was to really, come in from a position of relief, right? What can we do as a brand? Not only just provide product, but what can we do as a brand to provide that relief to their pain? So with that insight, we embarked on a mission during the back-to-school season to create content from the brand perspective, but not content that was about promotions and about retail offers, but more content that was adding value and getting into the shopping habits of these moms and these consumers. So on the website, we augmented the experience to allow moms to shop according to the age group and according to the grade category of their students. There was blog content that started going out that gave style trends and tips and health trends, so that moms were really started to feel that there was someone, a voice that was giving them that guidance that they needed. But not only did they make that commitment as a brand, Zappos then pulled in an influencer community to say, hey, show us how you experience Zappos and show us the challenges that you're going through during this back-to-school season and how you're solving those. And so we went through and we created a series of shopping video hauls and unboxing videos with real moms and real shoppers out there that were showing the confidence that they were receiving from looking at this content, making their orders, and then being pleased with the result. Ultimately, this program, as we look at back to school year over year, in terms of communicating ROI, we found a lot of value in helping the client understand they had increased their overall share of voice in this space. So there were a couple ways that we looked at doing that. In terms of their Zappos brand conversation, Zappos is made up of multiple divisions, and Zappos is often covered heavily because of their workplace culture and their leadership. During a high volume, 90 days where they were having plenty of conversation about their changes, we were still able to create an impact for their brand by having 37% of all those conversations be related to their back-to-school efforts. So while they had plenty of press and coverage about their business, they were still getting that conversation generated with those audiences they were looking to connect with. In looking at back-to-school conversations from 2015 compared to 2014, again, looking at that share of voice, what we were able to do is show them that, hey, here's a category, back to school, that you really, want to make, where you have an opportunity to make a connection with these families and these moms. And the way that conversation was engaged with in 2014 only led to 27 million impressions. Adopting that new content strategy, starting to provide value and value that turned into shareable value, led to nearly 450 million impressions from all of the activity from the community as well as the activity from the influencers. And if we take a look at that, that influencer activation, over a 3-month period was not too heavy. It was sizable enough to give some credibility and authenticity in the stories. But really, if you take a look at the 7.5 million impressions created by the influencers versus the nearly 450 created by the community and in the digital space, that really showed that there was a lot of resonance with that conversation and that audience. Taking a look at how we've built this data and how we built the research into our approach as an agency. We've looked at a number of different clients, and we've looked at a number of ways of how data has connected and driven success. And it's because we've really started to narrow this down into what we call the F.R.E.S.H approach. So the F.R.E.S.H approach is very similar to the scientific method, having a system for identifying a problem, leveraging the research, and connecting with the consumer, improving results. And if you take a look at F stands for find the problem. What is it that the brief is asking for? What is the client asking for? What is the pain of this audience? What is the opportunity for us to take advantage of? The research. What is the insight that is going to drive our thinking? In Zappos' case, it was, if the problem was connecting with moms and building repeat business, the research was that moms, they really have a strong pain point when it comes to shopping for clothes and shopping for their children. So really tapping into what is trending outside of the industry and what are the competitors doing, what are the people saying, what has been done in the space, has this need been served, how has it been served. Next, we move into emotion, building that emotional connection with the audience. The most successful ideas usually are the one that connects at the heart. They may happen to humor. They may happen to, they may pull at the heartstrings. They may, create shock and awe. But at some point, they have elicit some emotional reaction that increases that stickiness factor. So what is the emotion that we connect with? Again, in the Zappos example, that emotion was relief. How could we make these moms feel that there was a brand that was out there that was trying to relieve their problems? Simple. S stands for simple, and the reason why we focus on simple is that, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we're putting this conversation in a plain enough dialogue that can be understood by many. We often say, can this idea be summed up in a hashtag? Is it easy to understand? Is it easy to activate on? Is it sticky? Is it clear and shareable? And, our real gut check, even if we've got what we feel is the greatest idea in the world, at the end of the day, how does it help the business? How will this drive results? We all refer to this as ROI. We all refer to this how does this affect the bottom line? But the idea is, how does this connect to the goal? So, it's helpful to have a gut check and a system for helping, address, the many different issues that we face, from client needs to consumer needs, and finding a good system that gives us a strong foundation to be able to come up with our next idea. So overall, in bringing it home, we really want to focus, nowadays we move at such a rapid pace and things can become so transactional. Whether we're using Salesforce, we're using a number of tools that are helping us automate our reminders and automate our communications. It's very important for us to build that relationship and build a relationship on, based on connecting with who that audience is. Not just automating and being efficient, but also connecting as people. Ramp up on the knowledge. Again, the beauty of NetBase and what we've been able to do with them is that it allows us to quickly ramp up on a brand's previous year, previous 90 days, previous week, to help glean some insights on where there may be opportunities and where we might be able to help. A very important piece here is speak human. We get so caught up in technology and acronyms and buzzwords and the way that we speak in our internal dialogue that, for us to really connect with our audiences, whether we're connecting on social media or we're connecting in a presentation, is to help, simplify, put in layman's terms. We're not being judged academically here. It's really about making sure that our message can connect with the audience and can help drive that action. And last but not least, and most important, is be in the mindset of providing value. At the end of the day, people's time and attention is precious. And if you're just going to be another brand, or if you're going to be another agency that's out there and trying to push your own products and push your own agenda, people are going to see right through you. So, have the mindset of creating value, have the mindset of presenting something new, something delightful, and that's where you'll really see your opportunities for relationships to grow. And with that said, I'd love you guys to keep up the conversation with me online. I'm at Sergio Claudio on Twitter. Also, my email is directly here. You can reach out to me at sergio@rockorange.com, and we can continue the conversation. Pass it over to you, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Sergio. Great examples. I think Sergio, highlighted some really awesome use cases, from, understanding, the conversations around, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and then dissecting it into, the various demographics, as well as the impact influencers have on things like events, and then how content can drive engagement, such as the case with Zappos. We'll start to answer some of your questions here, if you want to start throwing them into the chat window. As we sort of round out the presentation, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take a few minutes just to talk about the 4 keys that we see that drive a successful social strategy. A lot of the folks on the call today are responsible for social within their organization, or thinking about using social to solve some of these problems that Sergio just highlighted. So let me give you a few thoughts around leveraging social to really maximize its value within your organization. First, you have to align it with your key business objectives. As you saw throughout Sergio's presentation, right, you have to have a specific, goal in mind. And there's lots of different ways you can use it, from public relations and brand building to brand strategy and product launches, to your informing your digital marketing campaigns with, what's the right content, what are the right outlets, what influencers we need, to even customer care, identifying the problems that people are articulating, most frequently, and addressing those in a more timely fashion to increase customer satisfaction. So identify where the different, areas you can use the social insights, and make sure that you get buy-in from key executives so that you can build trust with this data and you can actually drive real change within your organization. I think a lot of times people get tools like these social analytics tools and without a clear, use case or multiple use cases in mind, and they start looking at the data, but it's not really tied to a strategic challenge. So data is only valuable if it's applied to something that's actually going to solve a problem that your key stakeholders are going to get behind here. The second key to making your social program successful is identify the right people and skills needed to help further that within your organization. You could have a dedicated analyst who is looking at social data all the time. The largest companies that we work with, like Target and Yum Brands and such, they have a team of people looking at the data, and they've got social analysts, and they bring in data from multiple sources. You don't need to be that big in order to take advantage of that. You could look at your community manager, or maybe a researcher, or even a part-time person who's doing who's taking a look at the social insights. But just make sure that that person has the time to actually roll up their sleeves and sort of wade through the information, because there's a lot of really good information to find. So skew on the side as the community manager rather than a researcher if possible, because the community manager is a bit more, for lack of a better term, outward facing. They're very customer centric. They do have that human touch, and they do see, a lot of those conversations on your own brand channels, and this is a way to extend that. And then standardize your metrics and reporting. This is one of the most important things, and I think that Sergio would agree, is once you start monitoring your social channels and your social conversations, you need to use this consistent set of metrics, and you need to publicize your output on a regular basis. You need to treat social as a living process. You can't just get your insights once and walk away. You have to keep coming back to them. You need to track your campaigns over and over again, whether it's a weekly or monthly, cadence, whatever is relevant for your business. But there's a lot of ways you can do this, and you can set up things like, alerts, so you can get alerted when all of a sudden there's a spike in conversation around your brand or around a hashtag or around a campaign that you're running. You can set up alerts on competition to find out, gosh, all of a sudden there's a spike in my competitor's conversation, or brand sentiment is changing, what's happening, and how do I get more research around that. But you can also set up automated reports that actually keep pushing this information out in front of your stakeholders so that they're aware of all the good work that you're doing with your campaigns. Really important, and this kind of goes into the buy-in and the trust with your senior executives and your stakeholders. When you're using social for these really important marketing programs, make sure that you're going back and revisiting the data. The best part about social is that you're getting all kinds of conversations in real time, and it allows you to correct your campaigns in real time. It allows you to adjust on the fly and measure the impact of those changes as you go throughout the campaign. And I have a couple questions around that for Sergio here at the end. And then lastly, make sure you select a platform that actually meets your needs. It has a strong natural language processing capability to break down those sentences and doesn't give you sort of false impressions of what those conversations are. You can often see multiple sentiments in a single sentence. I like brand X. I will never buy brand Y. You need to make sure you know which sentiment is associated with which object, because that can have a huge impact on your analysis and how you dissect those conversations. So with that, I think we have a few questions, and then I have a couple I wanted to throw Sergio's way as well. Selma, do you have some of the questions from our audience today?
Yes, thank you so much. Well, thank you to both of you. We already have some great questions that came in, so I'll go ahead and get started. We have an audience member that wants to know, how much historical data do you typically use when performing research for your campaign strategies? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The amount of data is really dictated by how much data we need to be able to identify a trend. So, typically we can start with 90 days of data. Depending on how long our engagement might be, we could be creating an annual strategy, and so in taking a look at an annual strategy, we may look at an entire year to understand what were the trends, what were the peaks and valleys throughout every shopping season or throughout every period throughout a year, to also then use that to measure our overall results again. So if we start to look at data for 90 days, then we're also going to expect to be able to prove results in 90 days. If we're looking at data over 15 months because, it takes a little bit longer for a trend to stick, or there's been a lot of kind of back and forth in a brand's activity, then we'll also look to report on 15 months of results if applicable.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for that for that insight. We have another audience member that wanted you to share some analytical tools and just what your experience has been working with some of your examples.
Sure. So for our analytical tools, again, we're using NetBase as a social listening platform. We've had plenty of experience with other platforms out there. The part of the reason why we've stayed with them for so long is that it's the accessibility of the information in a rapid time frame. So, with that first question being how much data do you need to pull? We've been very pleased with the fact that NetBase allows us to pull data, as far back as 2 years, versus some tools that we've seen really only allow us to have 30 days of data. In terms of trying to do that will of receive and get into some of that research and get into some of the story behind a previous year of success for a brand or previous year of failures, we really need to have that access to that data at our fingertips. We also use consumer insights reports to match some of the conversation trends that we see against some of the reported trends, or what some of the successful brands have been doing, or what some of the insights are within the industry, to really help offset and help calibrate the information that we're seeing. So it is a combination of various tools. A lot of times we will start with NetBase, or just simply Google and Google Trends to help find which string we need to tug at, and then keep unraveling from that point forward.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you again. We have another audience member that wanted some clarification about the cotton example, the cotton event that you mentioned, Sergio. We wanted to know if you collected metrics on those who were reached, so the impressions created, and what actions they took. Did they engage with the event or the brand, and did any of them become customers?
Yeah, so Cotton has an interesting position in this case. As a board, their mission is to really help showcase the versatility of the cotton fabric and to get more manufacturers to create using cotton, but also to create more awareness for it and its benefits, to drive more demand from consumers. Therefore, more manufacturers and retailers will sell items with cotton. So, this was really purely about awareness and engagement with this actual event, because the event was designed to show the versatility. So with 24 hours of looks and 1,500 different outfits, the idea there was to show that cotton is such a versatile material and versatile fabric that you can wear it, for loungewear. You can wear it for a night out. You can wear it during the day as casual. You can wear it for formal. You can wear it for weddings. And that was really the purpose of the fashion show. Now, in terms of the metrics in our reporting, it was around fans engaging with the key terms. Again, being able to see the live streams of the actual event, and seeing that people were using the hashtags, and that people were retweeting the content that was coming from our influencers, or they were retweeting the looks that we were showcasing. Really showed that for an event that was designed to create awareness and to show presence and versatility, the varied activities that happened around the various outfits and the various aspects of the event were very well received, and really, showed that there was a connection being made with that audience.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that clarification. Another question for you, Sergio. We have an audience member that wants to know if there is an open source tool or application that would prove value to an organization prior to investment.
I'm sorry, can you read that one more time?
I think that they wanted to know is prior to, I think the question really was our audience member wanted to know before they invest in a full-blown, social analytics solution, are there open source tools that they can use to do some, prove the value of this sort of approach for their own campaigns? Is there a cost-effective way to prove the value of social before they invest?
Absolutely. So, one thing that I want to be taken away from this discussion, while NetBase has been a great partner in this process, research is truly about the methodology, right? It's not so much about the tool that you're using, it's about the questions that you're asking and the way that you're digging. So, again, as I mentioned, sometimes a simple Google search suffices. It's really having a method for understanding the questions that you want to ask. So in our F.R.E.S.H method, what is that problem? In research, it's what can we find out about that problem, right? It's designing your research to be able to answer questions about the audience, about the brand category, about the brand competitors. And, once you have those questions, there are plenty of tools out there, from Google to Social Bakers to, Topsy, which was once around previously, there's a hashtag battle. There's a few tools out there that can help you prove different areas and answer different questions. Now, once you start to develop that habit of asking the right questions and finding data, you'll start to notice, hey, there might be gaps in the data that I'm able to access, and then that's when you really start to look into these social listening tools and analytics platforms that really strengthen your ability to answer those questions.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much again. I think we have some time just for a few more, and so here you go, Sergio. Question for you, and I think this is a great question. We have an audience member that wants to know, how are your research and observations different when applied to B2B engagements rather than B2C?
No, that's a great question. So with B2B engagements, from the position that we're in as an agency, it's really understanding the industry that the client or that the business might be in, understanding the needs of those businesses and decision makers. Often in a corporate setting, you have thought leadership, you have industry leadership that might be might be a goal, and so a lot of times those insights are really based around what's happening at the leadership level of an organization, what's happening from a business standpoint competitively. Are there other businesses or are there other organizations that have a similar mission but have had wins that are similar to the goals that we aspire to? So our searches there may be looking at campaigns, marketing activations, looking at initiatives, looking at blog posting, looking at media coverage around a business, and then coming back to the business that we're looking to engage with and saying, hey, here's what we've been able to glean about you. Here's how we can look at the activity that one organization has had compared to your own. From a consumer standpoint, it's a little bit different. From a consumer standpoint, it's taking a look at the congested media landscape that exists just as consumers, taking a look at what's happening on social media, what are the most active conversations, what are the trends that are happening there, and how do you connect with consumers of varying interests and varying age groups, from 18 to 25 that may have varied walks of life but tend to follow the same patterns and engage. So that's why we'll take a look at category conversations around fashion, dining, gaming, to see, who are the brands that are being mentioned, what are the topics, what are the trends, what are the sentiments and emotions, to really help identify that insight for engaging.
All right, wonderful. And one final question for you, Sergio. How long does it take before you typically see the results of your campaign strategies in action?
Well, I think the beauty about digital and social media is that, depending on what your strategy is and your engagement level, you can see results as soon as you put something out into the space. I think that's, being involved in digital for as long as I have been, in the comparison between offline media is that, you can put something out there, whether you're testing, whether you're doing a focus group, whether you're posting something to social media, and you can see, what the engagement is like. You can see what the response is like. So, in terms of how long it will take us to realize and start to see benefits from the programs that we implement, in the case of cotton, again, we saw it within the first 8 hours. In the case of Zappos, it was an ongoing, day by day, week by week progression of positive activity. And wherever there was activity that started to fall short of expectation, there's the opportunity to optimize and continue that momentum.
Yeah, along those lines, we have a lot of customers, and I know this is our last question, but we do have a lot of customers who have, often a daily or a weekly check-in meeting. The bigger brands often will do it on a daily basis. They'll just get together for 10, 15 minutes and just review sort of the changes. If they've made a change to the campaign, what's been the impact, so they actually can see in real time, as Sergio said, you can see results pretty quickly. So establish a frequency that you guys go back and revisit this, and then I think you'll see that you can start to accelerate, and as you do these tweaks, you'll see immediate impact on your programs.
Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. Well, that is all the time that we have today. I want to sincerely thank Sergio and Mike. Thank you so much for a fantastic presentation and for sharing your insight with us. As a reminder, AMA members can view an archive of this webcast at any time. You can do so by visiting ama.org/webcast. Also, I want to thank ReadyTalk, who provided us with the web conferencing platform for our webcast today. If you want to learn more about ReadyTalk and their services, feel free to check them out at readytalk.com/AMA. And last but not least, thank you so much for your time and attention, for all these wonderful questions you submitted and your engagement. And I wish everyone a great rest of your day.